Welcome back to the fifth and final video of this tutorial series for the Master Material for Beginners. And this is kind of a bonus video on the ambient occlusion base setup. I had mentioned in prior videos that I was going to touch base on this, and I did not. So in this one, we're going to talk about setting up ambient occlusion. The engine default, as it wants to use it, in the indirect lighting, it will provide some extra AO. But we're also going to take it a step further and create some custom math that allows us to use some linear interpolation to kind of overlay it on top of our albedo and give really precise control over the highlights and lowlights to help kind of simulate that extra AO, if need be, even indirect daylight. So again, this is the final video. Please stay tuned for the next series. It's going to be Unreal 4 Tutorial Intermediate Master Materials. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Alright, so we're back again with a little bit of bonus content because I did say that we're going to talk about the AO and we didn't touch base on that. And while it can be minor, it could also contribute in a big way on some meshes. And so there's a couple of ways we want to use the AO. There's the engine default, which uses AO in indirect lighting to kind of help simulate ambient occlusion on top of the screen space. And then there's the method that I use a lot, which is to multiply it on top of our albedo and give ourselves a what's called a LERP, a linear interpolation that allows us to control the white and black balance values. And so let's go ahead and get started with that by plugging in an ambient occlusion map and seeing what it does. Okay, so to do that we need to go over here to the content browser and we need to find something that will work for our ambient occlusion map. Okay, and we want this to be fairly clear, so we will, as a matter of fact, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and pick the texture that we imported. So we'll use this emissive mask as the ambient occlusion. Alright, so we'll right click and type in 2D to pull up that, and we'll just call this AO. Alright, we're getting the auto save there, so that didn't go over well when I hit enter. Alright, AO, we'll title it. And we'll put this under the group AO. Okay. And we'll come down here under the description and just title it AO. Okay. So let's go ahead and plug this in. Let's apply. And let's go into the engine. We'll hit F11. And what we need to do is we need to go to our material instance and let's turn this emissive power back off. Okay. And so what we can see is that everywhere where this texture was black, it's reading some extra ambient occlusion. And everywhere where it's white, it reads none. Okay, so when we look at this object in direct light, we're not really seeing much happen at all. And that's because it's entirely lit, and therefore there isn't much occlusion happening. Or at least not that the engine's not already taken care of. We can see it a little bit. When we roll around the back into the indirect lighting, it becomes quite apparent. Okay, so for example, if we were, making something that had a lot of crevices and whatnot, when we looked at the sunlight, it would be fairly lit. When we looked at it back here, we would see the dark and the crevices from baking out an AO or whatnot. Okay, but there's an extra use that we can get out of this, some extra mileage, and that's by adding it on top of our albedo. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and change this texture. Okay, go into our material instance, and let's just grab the this right here will work just fine. So if we double click on it, we can see that the stones are lit a little bit and everything else is kind of black, and that's going to work just fine. So we'll go ahead and pull this, and that's given us a little bit better simulated AO. So now we can actually see the stones getting darker in there and whatnot. Okay, so let's go back into our material and let's talk about a different way to use it. Alright, so we'll go ahead and drag this way down here. Let's settle here. What we could do is we could multiply this on top of our albedo. Alright, and what I mean by that is let's hit Control W and duplicate it. Oops, let's grab it and let's just scroll up here and make some room for ourselves inside of our albedo comment box. Okay, and what we can do is we can begin to multiply this on top of there. but we don't want it to happen by default. We want it to happen with a switch. So let's go ahead and take a switch, static switch parameter, and let's say has AO albedo overlay. Alright. So if this is false, then we just want to plug in our normal and before we do that, let's go ahead and move that right over there. If it's false, then we just want to plug in our normal maps. Right? Nothing changed. So all we did was we added an extra link. We didn't actually change anything. Let's give ourselves some room. If it's true, however, then we want to run this simulation, but we want to multiply this with it. Alright, so let's go ahead and hit M on the keyboard, and let's drag this in here and drag this in there. And something to note real quick is that you can only have one input. So if I were to drag this down to false, you see it replaces the input. I can drag this back. But you can have multiple outputs, so I can just keep dragging this out and plugging it into multiple inputs. So this can actually feed into false, and it can also feed into this chain of events that will read true. Alright, so if true, then take all this and multiply it by the AO. Okay, now let's apply that and let's see what that does. Alright, so we'll go into our instance and we'll go into the base. Actually, what we want to do is we didn't tell this thing where to live. So let's go over here and let's assign this to the albedo. Okay. So now we'll go to our material instance. When we go to albedo, we have this has AO albedo overlay, and let's just turn that on. Let's see what's happening. Okay. So we can see what's happening right now is that it's taking this and it's multiplying it on top of it. So all those black pixels are getting multiplied to a darker value, and all the whiter pixels are getting multiplied by near their same value. So if I toggle this off and on, you can see the difference it makes. So it's giving us some extra depth over here, even in the lighting. So we're basically using the AO and we're cheating it, right? And we're just applying it everywhere if we want to. But I'm not satisfied with the results, so I want to be able to control how much the white values and the black values are affecting my albedo. So there's actually a different piece of math we can use rather than a multiply. So I'll go ahead and delete this, and it's called a linear interpolate. So if we hold L on the keyboard, this is the new node, we haven't talked about this. Basically what it's going to do, it is going to try to linearly interpolate between this map and the others via an alpha. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use this map as the alpha. Okay, we're going to plug that into the alpha, and we're also going to use the A and the B as some scalar parameters. So we'll go ahead and drop 2 in the scene, or rather we'll just drop 1 and we'll duplicate it when we're done. So this is going to be AO white's power. Alright, and this will go under the albedo, and we'll say controls AO overlay white's power. Alright, and we'll duplicate this, and this one's just going to be for black. Alright, we'll plug this into A and B. Okay, and we want the default value on both of these to be 1 and 1. Okay, so now that we have that plugged up, let's take a second to look at what we're doing. We have a mask, and we're saying to draw a lerp between the two, and we're telling it what powers they should be in. Okay, so we're saying the, and as a matter of fact, before we go any farther, let me just tell you that these need to be reversed. It would seem that the main power would be on the top, but it's actually on the bottom. We're saying draw the value of white at 1, draw it fully, and a value of black at 1, draw it fully, according to this map. So all of these values are going to stay the same. And what's going to happen is, as we start to crunch this white down, it's going to pull these white values down. As we begin to crunch these, it's going to do the same. So it's kind of like adjusting the levels. And that's what we've got here. And one more thing worth noting is, you can't actually plug in a 3-channel map into the alpha. What we need to do is just grab one of these channels, say for example the R channel. If we did not, we would actually get an error. And that's because it's reading it as a black and white value is what it's doing. Alright, so we'll move this out of the way, and now if true, we want to multiply all of this together. Right? There we go. So now when we true, we're adding this math to the albedo. And let's just make sure that all this is inside of the albedo. We'll go ahead and apply this. And we'll go over to our material instance. Alright, so when we turn the albedo overlay off and on, what we can see now is that we're not really seeing much of a result. And that's because we're multiplying, we're kind of lerping between a value of 1 and 1 right now. So if we wanted our blacks to be true black like they are in the mask, we would set that to 0, which is the value of black. And our whites to be true white. Okay. So now when I turn it off, you can see that we're getting the result we were getting earlier. Alright. So now what we have the ability to do, and the point of all that is, if this is too much black, I can just start to tone this back up towards 1, and I can begin to get a really subtle difference. Right? So you can just barely see it happening now. And even furthermore, I could take the whites down if I wanted to, or I could bring them up, kind of pump them out like that. And this is just a small levels adjustment, and obviously it's optional. And to be completely honest, it's not something I use all the time, but it does come in handy when you're doing stuff that has age, and you kind of want it to look like there's some extra grime in there without having to go through extensive work. You can preview that in the engine. And of course, this is stuff that will all be housed in your albedo and your roughness as well. But it's just that extra, percent to go just a little bit farther with it and take it to the next level. But there's a little bonus video for you. Again, you can just turn this off and use the AO as the regular. And what we'll do finally, just to cap this all off, is we'll just tell the engine whether or not we even have an AO. So what we need to do is, in order to do that, we need to have a another static switch down here. So we'll right click, go to static switch parameter, and say has AO, and we will put this inside of the base. Alright, and we'll move this line over here. Alright, and if it's true, and we'll say has AO, and we'll put in parentheses engine default, just so we know which AO we're talking about. We're talking about the actual ambient occlusion. And if it's false, well then we'll just put a parameter. We don't need it to be scalar because we're not going to change it in there, and we'll plug that into there, and we'll make it 1, which means it's going to be a value of white, which is essentially is having no extra AO. So we'll go ahead and apply those changes. What we'll do is we'll go in albedo and we'll turn off the overlay so we can see what we're doing, and we'll scroll down to the base, and we'll say has AO. Alright, and so if we scroll down to the back, because this is the engine default AO, which is only based in indirect lighting, and we toggle this off and on, you can see the result that we get. So over here, we're not getting too much across the board, but when we look at it in the indirect lighting, we get some nice effects. Right. Okay, so we'll go ahead and hit F11, bring everything back. We'll save all, and that concludes the bonus video. Go ahead and comment this, call it AO, move everything down, and hope to see you guys in the next video where we'll go over some more complex methods like I discussed at the end of the last part, and we'll do some blending and some vertex painting. Hope you guys enjoy. Thanks for watching.